Okay, everybody, welcome back to episode 6. It's called Life is the New Cool Podcast. I'm filling in the big seat for Matt Kern, who is out on assignment. The topic today is It Takes a Life to Save a Life. And tonight we're going to have some women from the boxing world talk about how they're empowering individuals. And so we'll kick things off. Catherine, if you could introduce yourself and kind of take charge of this meeting.
Thank you, Eugene. Glad to have you. It's been a while since I've seen you. I think probably prior to COVID, we met in North Carolina when I was speaking. So glad you could join us tonight. My name is Commissioner Catherine Whittington, and I'm here in Ashtabula County, Ohio. And basically, I have Rural America Tackling the Drug Epidemic, which is a program that I speak nationally on, as well as do panel discussions here in Ashtabula County. And it is my story of how addiction has affected my life, not only as a victim of a crime, but as a mother with children in addiction, raising my grandchildren, and being a county commissioner, and how addiction impacts the general fund budget for the county. So kind of have a all around different view point from a lot of this. I'm excited for tonight's guests. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Deborah King.
Hi, this is Dr. Deborah King. I am the CEO and founder of It Takes a Life to Save a Life organization. I am an ambassador, an advocate, and a survivor of addiction. And from that, I knew it was time for me to give back. So I began to go out and do just that. I became a mental health counselor specializing in addiction. As many of you know, I am very familiar with the boxing world because I grew up in it. My father is none other than promoter Don King. My guest today, I've had the pleasure of working with these ladies one-on-one, and we have stories that we can share. And without further ado, I would like to introduce first five-time champion and international champion, Mia St. John. She is also an advocate for mental health, and her life personally has been affected by the results of mental health. Mia, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So tell us, what have you been doing? How is things going?
Well, I retired back in I think it was 2017. And I've been a mental health advocate. I was a mental health advocate long before my son and his father passed. So it was something that I was always doing, but ever since their passing, I've gone just full time into it. I have a foundation for young adults who suffer from mental illness and addiction, which is both of what my son and his father suffered from. So, and I myself deal with addiction and mental health issues as well.
So has things been going rather smoothly now? You've recovered from Christoph's death and moved forward and taking good care of yourself?
Losing your son and his father,
we're losing you.
You don't recover from. Those that has lost a child, you learn how to live with it,
Okay.
but you don't recover. I don't think any mother can say I've recovered from losing my child. You learn to live with the cards that you were dealt, and you do the best you can to help other parents who have children that are suffering.
That is very good. Catherine, as we talked with you dealing with your children that were in addiction and the mental health issues, has it trickled down to the girls as well?
So, we have two that were affected by the drugs out of the three. We know that our oldest was not affected. No one was using at that point. I would say, I don't know if it's so much the mental health piece of it. I would say that two of them were too young to know what happened or what was happening. But our oldest one definitely, she talks about those memories. So I don't, at the ripe old age of 8 this week, she has not shown any signs of mental health or, even depression. Like we just aren't seeing it. We strive with her to, she's a learner. She loves to learn. So, we keep a close eye on all three. Two are in school, one is still in preschool. So, we are definitely aware that this could be something that happens down the road, but at this point, we are not seeing anything. As far as my son goes, there were no mental health issues that we saw or identified. He was a straight A student, honor roll. He played sports. He was popular. He just, he made some choices that in 11th grade weren't the greatest choices. And he is, still making not great choices. As you know, Deborah, it's been since December of 2019 since we've heard from him. So, it's hard to say what he's going through, if there is mental health that developed afterwards due to the addiction. It's just hard to say because we don't have contact with him.
Okay. Well, Mia, I have another question for you. As the parents you help, what is the most prevalent question or situation that you see repeatedly with mothers that have children that are afflicted by mental illness?
The biggest thing that I see, and usually, remember, I deal with kids who are not only suffering from mental illness, but have addiction issues, which.
We lost her.
I think we lost her.
She'll come more back than not.
Now we lost you there for a minute. You froze. Can you repeat what you said? I think we lost her again.
I think we lost her permanently that time. She may have to call back in.
Yes, well, to our audience, Mia is looking after someone right now with mental health issues. So she's driving, which may interfere with her feed. So with no further ado, I want to introduce Jill Diamond, who represents the WBC Cares. The WBC is, one of the most renowned commissions in the sport of boxing. One of the big three, I would say. Jill, how did you get involved with WBC Cares?
Well, talking about mental health, I was not a boxing fan. I didn't grow up the way you did, Deborah. My father-in-law was a boxer. His name was Clyde, the Texas Tornado Chastain. My husband loved boxing. And when my husband passed, I started boxing. It was my Prozac. It was
okay.
Addiction to replace the depression that I was going through. But I noticed that a lot of the women that I met at the gyms were not being paid attention to. So I went literally online and said, where are these organizations? And I saw WBC. I sent them an email. I said, what's going on? Why aren't you sanctioning women? And they wrote me back. And literally started that way. They invited me to the convention and I got, you know what boxing is, you get sucked in. It starts
Yes.
your mistress, it ends up your wife. It's not what I do for a living. I make no money from boxing. But the minute I walked into the first convention, there was a room full of like 3,000 people, every color, creed, religion, nation, whatever. I said, they say they are the world, they are the world. And I went to Jose, Suleiman, and Mauricio, and I said, we have the most incredible platform here to do good. And so we started WBC Cares, and it's just grown and flourished since that point. It's just an unbelievable, gratifying experience because even though we're an organization that deals with people all over the world, our core values are very similar. And the issues that we deal with, maybe for different reasons, but they are very similar: family, home, trust, you know. So I've broken it up into different locations because the problems they're having in the Mideast are not the problems they're having in Iowa, and we deal with it on a local level. But it's been quite a gratifying experience. And Mia is back. Hero.
Sorry.
Mia is, I'm going to say this before she disappears. Mia knows this. Mia is my hero. She walks,
Aw.
talks the talk. I don't always agree with her, but I always respect her because she really, really does it. She's out there in the field working with those kids, getting up in the morning, working out with them, getting them places to live, doing everything that you can imagine. She has an unbelievable passion for helping people.
Thank you, Jill.
True?
Aw.
It's true.
Thank you.
Bravo. I applaud you.
And this started before the tragedies that she went through. She always had a compassion for people who needed help and direction, always.
Well, you know, I didn't get
Thank
to meet Mia then. I got to meet Mia when she was the consummate athlete. So I was there when she was fighting. So
Right.
that was the Mia I got to see, to know and love, because I watched her dedication to her craft. And if she's half as dedicated to those children as she is to her craft, she's doing them a great service.
Absolutely.
Oh, thank you. And your dad was my first promoter.
Look at that. Look at that. So I remember,
Although Aram takes credit for everything. That's okay. We love them both.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Hey,
So do you have anything coming up? I'm sorry, Eugene.
No, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, and this may be, it may be a stupid question, but my mother died when she was 58, and she always had something wrong, like mentally. They always said my mother was off. She she was never really quite right. So I don't. My question would be: is mental illness like something you're born with, or did something happen because she was in an abusive relationship with her first marriage, and when it was time for my mother to die, the nurse looked at the chart and she said, if the doctor doesn't tell you what's on your mother's chart, let me know, I'll tell you. And I guess she had some sort of small tumor that was weighing in on a part of her brain, maybe that made her a little off. So that's my question: is mental health, is it is does the illness become before the addiction, or is it mental health problem something you're born with? I don't know.
Well, I'll answer that from a therapist's point of view. Normally, when there's an addiction, the mental health is the core issue. No one wakes up and says, I'm going to be an addict today. Something had to take you there. It could be the result of a trauma from abuse, be it mental, physical, or emotional. Trauma is trauma. So we suppress things, and in turn, we sometimes disconnect from reality. And we have to do things to allow our minds to survive. So sometimes they split off. You can have split personalities because one is stronger than the other as a means of protection. But if you're saying that they found a tumor, that seems more like as a result of some kind of injury. So a lot of times you receive injuries that can become traumatic brain injuries, and they play a big part on the rest of your brain function because we don't know what is actually depriving. Is it depriving blood flow to your frontal lobe? Is it pressing on a nerve? Is it killing off some tissue? So your mother would have had to have gone through a lot of testing to know that. And a lot of times, if you're not taught to go look to have a CAT scan or MRI, it's nothing that would be brought to your attention that you're supposed to do.
Mm.
You
Yeah,
know,
it just seems to me like, and again, this may be naive or just the way I look at it. It seems to me like a lot of people suffer from mental illness. My little brother died at 29. He had diabetes and he failed to take care of himself, to do what was required for him to live a healthier life because of whatever challenges he had growing up that didn't set well with him spiritually, mentally. It seems like mentally he made some choices, to Catherine's point, where people decide to go down a particular path. When I think of mental illness, I honestly think that a lot of people struggle mentally with a lot of stuff. And some obviously are more severe than others. So I'm just trying to think about, the lady Mia who's driving to go help somebody. What class are we talking about? What level of mental illness are we talking about? Someone who's walking around aimlessly in the snow with no shoes on, or someone who's just suffering from sort of personal mental challenge? Can you maybe talk a little bit more about that?
is that directed to Mia?
Yeah, anybody, that would shed some light on it.
Well, it depends. Each person, when you have a mental issue, is different. What might affect me one way may affect you completely differently.
Mm-hmm.
So genetics do have a part in this. A lot of things are generational, they're passed down. That's why medical history is so important. As a therapist, when I do my assessment and we try to do an intake, we try to find out as much medical history as we can, because it fills in the gaps, or it puts the puzzle pieces together as to how we got to point B from point A.
Right.
Because a lot of times you can be predisposed to addiction, and if somebody doesn't tell you, well, alcoholism is real prevalent in our family, or we have a long history of drug addicts and this is the drug that took them out of here. We need to know that, because you shouldn't try it at all. That curiosity could in fact kill you. So the more we know and understand, it does us a great service. So all families, in my opinion, need to share. Don't keep things a secret. Secrets can be the difference between life or death.
I so agree with you. I mean, they say that we're only as weak as our secrets. And the truth is that we all have issues. It's a question of to what degree those issues take. Afraid of failing, afraid of going on an airplane, afraid of crossing the street. I mean, the brain is complicated, life is complicated. We all have issues. And if we don't speak out, first of all, we are depriving ourselves of any hope that we might have to have a better life. And also, the person that we speak to, we're giving them an opportunity to tell us what's bothering them. It's a win-win situation. But I grew up in a time, I'm a lot older than you guys. Mia calls me mom. But I grew up in a time when I grew up in a very violent home. My brother was mentally ill. The diagnosis was changed every week. We call it brain illness now, but he was considered schizophrenic, paranoid. Next week it would be a different diagnosis, whatever, but they didn't have the means or the hope to treat people. It was one step away from Willowbrook, where they used to chain people to the walls. All they could do was medicate them with things like Haldor, which made their arms shake and their head shake, and give them electric shock treatment before they would use anesthesia, just placing these bricks on their head and literally shock them into seizure. And that was the treatment, and it was considered compassionate at that time. I mean, now we're in a world where there's more information, more hope, and more awareness, but we're still going back to the same values. We're still not teaching children that being different is okay, that there is no such thing as normal. You know, to be able to just discuss their reality, to create a safe and trusting environment with children, because it has to start there. It has to start. We have to get rid of words like crazy and normal and just like say to people, how do you feel today on a level from 1 to 10? Oh, I feel a 7. Okay, let's sit down and talk about it. But we got to get rid of those words, and we got to start being able to reach out and reach back to people, starting with the youngest in our society.
Now, what's that look like nationally from like a national movement? Are we doing anything about it? I had a conversation with a group of folks the other day who have some challenges, and they kept using the word disability, disability, disability. And I know that the government has to, they have to put a title on some things to be able to give a name to it, to be able to put it in the system, to be able to provide benefits or whatever someone may need. But I was saying to them, it seems as though to me that most people are disabled to some sort, in some respect. They have some sort of challenge, speaking to what you were just talking about. So from a national standpoint, do you feel like we're making progress as it relates to mental health?
Mia, unfortunately, who just went down, can speak more to that because she has challenged the system. When her son became a certain age, she no longer had, she had to fight for guardianship in order to get him help because he aged out of the system. So, I mean, are we doing better? Yes. Is mental wellness a low-hanging fruit? Yes. It's not a sexy disease. It's not, you know, a celebrity disease. Nobody wants to really deal with it. Nobody wants to admit to it. There are things now like the Mental Health in School Act, which Grace Napolitano has championed, where they're getting counselors into school. But until there's another tragedy, when everybody's like, oh my God, we should have thought about this, we should have done something, people brush it under the rug. People don't want to deal with it. They don't want to deal with mental wellness. They don't want to deal with homelessness. They don't want to deal with things that aren't pretty and fresh and easy and solvable, because there's no way really to always solve this issue. It's a process. And I coming out of a home where mental illness dominated my life, I'm a secondary, I guess you could say I'm a secondary generation to it, where I left that home with tremendous amount of anxiety. Because if you grow up in an atmosphere where people are always erratic in their behavior and you never know what's going to happen, you then also develop many neurotic traits, and mine was generalized anxiety. I mean, and it took me years and years to learn how to live with not thinking the sky was going to fall, you know, the phone wouldn't ring, or you know, the rent wouldn't be paid, because that's the secondary degree of people who have grown up in homes where mental wellness is not being dealt with.
So Jill, I'd just like to piggyback and go back to what you were talking about in regards to people don't want to have that conversation. People are sweeping it under the rug. And I think that's one of the things that has driven me to talk about my story with how addiction has affected my family. And same with mental health, is that we need to reduce that stigma. We need to take that stigma away so that people will start changing the conversation and start talking about it, telling their stories. That's the only way we're going to be able to do the greater good and help more people get the help they need for this disease. Because at the end of the day, addiction and mental health are diseases, and that we need to address those and treat them and not have that stigma attached to them. You know, we don't have stigma attached to other diseases.
No, but
So
people see this as a sign of weakness as opposed to a disease. And problem because
Absolutely. Absolutely. And asking for help is not a sign of weakness, but in fact, a way to stay strong.
Hello.
So, we never
Thank
get
you.
that. We never get that part. And, asking for help is only forming a question, how do I get this? No question is a dumb question because somebody out there has the same question. They don't have the courage to ask it. So if we start asking more questions and teach children that it's okay to raise your hand and ask a question if you don't understand and not be laughed at or not be called again a name because you didn't get it on the first time. But think about the whole thing of learning. Nobody gets it on the first time. Somebody had to always show us. So it's a way that we have to really sort of restructure the way we educate,
absolutely,
because we educate putting so much expectations on pass fail A to F that we traumatize the kids in the fact that they want to learn something.
Well, and I
They're
think it's,
afraid to get a bad grade and go home. They're afraid to go to the teacher and say they don't understand. They're afraid to ask a question in front of their classmates because they don't want to be laughed at or ridiculed. So they're living in their own made up trauma that could have been alleviated by just saying, I don't understand. Could you repeat that? So now we're going to go hang with the so-called cool kids. Let me try something else to fit in. And that's how peer pressure begins to develop addiction habits.
Mm.
well,
well, and I think it's important that, when we're talking, especially with our youth, even our adults, I think it's a sign of strength to raise your hand and say, I'm ready. I'm ready. I need help. I need hope. I need to start today at this moment. And so to me, sending that message out that, asking for help, asking for that, asking the question, that's strength, that's power, that's empowering people. And I think that's really a key to, getting people to understand it's okay to raise your hand. It's okay. It's not a sign of weakness.
absolutely. As I said, I grew up at a time where I was yelled at by my family for disclosing the fact that the house that I lived in, which looked very normal and middle class, had many, many, many secrets in it, many, many violent and horrible secrets in it. We were not supposed to talk about these things, and we were not ever allowed to talk about these things. So have we come? Yeah, we've come farther than we have. We're here talking about this now, but it has to start with the children. It really has to start with the children. And given this pandemic, it has to start now because these children are suffering so badly because we know we've been through terrible things in our lives. We know that life can stink and then get better, stink and get better. They have a time frame for this kind of stuff. They're locked in this pandemic and not realizing that it's transient, that we will be back at some point. So, yeah,
This is a conversation that we've had quite a bit, Jill, as regards to the pandemic and our children being taught online and having telemedicine and all of these things because, and Deborah can give the point through the counseling piece, is we don't have our eyes on these kids like we used to. And we don't have our eyes, you can pull it together for a telehealth medicine. That body language piece is huge. With kids doing online schooling, we're not seeing them all day long on a regular basis. They're coming in for a 40-minute Zoom or 20-minute Zoom. So these teachers do not have that set of eyes to help them, or even for those children who are suffering, who need to reach out or to have somebody safe to talk to. They're not having that right now during the pandemic. And that is a great concern, especially in the children's service world, is these children that are coming out of this pandemic setting, as soon as, we can get back into churches and get back into the schools, what is that going to do on that end as well for the abuse and neglect? Because you're now going to have people seeing these children, and these children are going to be talking.
Yeah.
I would like to interject that I feel that children, as well as teachers, as well as parents, anybody who's been confined, should have counseling before they're reintegrated into a school or workplace, because the same person that left is not coming back. We're not that same. They've learned, they've separated from socialization skills. When you don't have to be accountable to nobody, you don't have to behave a certain kind of way before an hour, you lose socialization skills. So you're not used to sharing. You're not used to being considerate of somebody else's opinion or time or anything, or just sheer respect. Now let's think about if they're traumatized in the very home where they're doing their school or the telehealth. If you move or say the wrong thing, when you hang up, all hell is going to break loose in that house.
Right.
A lot of times when we punish our children, we may say, go to your room. Now, where are they studying at? Now their room becomes their punishment. Now that's their whole life. We go to school in the room. That's where I go when I'm punished. So don't ask me how my day is. You know how my day is. My day sucked because I've been in this room all day. You know what I'm saying? So we need to treat them like we really do understand. They need to get out, exercise in between there with the mom and dad or brother, whoever in the house. Let's just do some calisthenics, something to stimulate your endorphins and to recharge your mind, because you're feeling imprisoned in the very place that you should feel the safest, which is your home. So everybody needs to be talked to and checked on where they've been confined and by themselves. That's where sports and activities came in as their outlet. Then that was taken away. So that puts a lot of responsibility on coaches and people like that, because they should still check on their team and encourage them. The standards we had before this pandemic. I still expect you to do your homework, be courteous to your parents, the different values and goals, and let them know that somebody outside of that house still cares about them. And a lot of our children don't have that. School was their escape. They might be hungry. School is where they got to eat. But they don't want to tell everybody that we're starving at home. So that puts another pressure point on them. These are young people. They shouldn't have to bear that. Yeah. Not in 2021.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when a child is abused or neglected, they don't want to talk up because they feel like they're setting off a bomb. They keep it quiet. They keep it quiet to themselves. I mean, I know that when I came out of my home, and this is what bothers me for kids now, is that because when you come out of an abusive home, the first thing I had to learn to do as an adult was stupid little things like make eye contact, to be able to shake hands, to touch somebody. You become very desocialized, very, very detached. These children are now being taught it's not safe to do all these other things that are very natural to do. How do we get them back to where they can feel comfortable with each other on a physical, psychological level again? It's going to be a challenge. And we're talking about the good children, the good homes. I mean, people are out there struggling. They don't have time to even deal with these issues. I mean, as you said, they're starving, they're not paying their rent, they're living on the streets. I mean, this is a really horrible and difficult situation, and it's worldwide.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's not singled out. Everybody is affected. It doesn't matter what race, what culture you're in, what educational status you're in, what job status you're in. Everybody was at home. It didn't matter, and some people adjusted to it better than others, because a lot of people, if you would look at how they behaved, we want to get out, we're not going to do this. As an act of rebellion, they jeopardized their own health and safety of other people just because they didn't want to be told what to do, even if being told what to do saved their life. So we're sending mixed messages. One, we're telling them, you need to obey and follow the rules. But then the next one, but you need to speak out if you see something wrong. That's hard for little people to understand, because what's considered wrong to me might not be considered wrong to where they grew up. So the culture differences is it's widespread, and help is help. We just need to have a symbol, just something like we can do peace sign. We need to have a help sign that it won't be traumatic. It'll be just like anything else we do, but it'll be a way for caregivers to know that there's a problem. That's what I would like to see happen, where it doesn't alert anybody that they're being told on, where we can sort of impress that to children, and they know that if they make this sign, it could look like whatever little high thing that kids do, that it would alert us that we need to go look a little further, really have a one-on-one visit. Because in counseling with me with addiction, I don't like the telehealth, because I, like Catherine said, I want to see your body actions. I want to see your movements, because I can tie myself down and sit on my hands for 30 minutes just so you won't see how fidgety I am, or me sweating because I'm just trying to hold on until you hang up, till I can get that next one. Then I'll clean myself up again for the next call. It's an easy system to beat if you're an addict, because we've manipulated and we've learned to master all those moves. So I don't believe there's no such thing as normal. It's more us addicts than it is so-called normal people. And I'll tell you that all day. It's more of us than it is of them. Luckily, it's a lot more of us in recovery, but the cemetery is winning. And I need that to stop.
Yeah, I was just thinking about whether there's a national conversation going on, and there may not be, because I haven't heard anything on it yet, as far as that transition, a transition that children need to make from being enclosed, primarily doing, online learning, to back in the classroom. But specifically, what do you go, like, what is the WBC Cares? What are they specifically doing to help with the problem? Is there a number of places people can walk into? What's that marketing message look like?
Well, we're not set up like that. Basically, we are a boxing organization, but we have a very large a social action part to us. So what we've done during this pandemic, we've done certain things, like we did PSAs with all of our world champions on distance learning, that we posted and sent out to different schools, saying to the kids, from Mike Tyson to anyone else you can think, encouraging students, parents, and teachers to hang in together. We've done twice a day, we've done talks, WBC talks, on everything from things to do with the pandemic, to things to do with sports, to parents coming on to try to stay connected to the community and keep people connected to each other, because it's the isolation that's so difficult. We have gotten people out of areas where they were in when they were locked down. We've provided food and funds for people who could not work within the community. We put together a mental health task force within our safety task force in boxing, where people could reach out, and we sent out messages on nutrition. We had exercise classes online. We did many, many, many things during this whole period of time to try to keep our community and the people involved in our sport as optimistic and as connected as possible. And we've done this all around the world. You know, I mean, we do it all over the world because we're in 170 countries. You know, so that's how we have specifically addressed it, by saying be safe, be secure, but don't be scared. Follow the procedures. We're going to get through this together. Reach out to us if you need to. We did a Heroes of Humanity group where we had people write in letters of people they thought did nice things during the pandemic. And we awarded them medals and certificates thanking them. They were everyone from doctors to firemen to a neighbor down the street who fed somebody. And we announced their name on air all the time, you know, and we're continuing to do that because there are certain countries that are not as fortunate as this one, where the pandemic is still raging. And unfortunately, a lot of those certificates and medals were given out posthumously because they were for people like doctors and nurses who died during the time. So that is how we address this. We have anti-bullying groups. We have we address all different kinds of social issues. A lot of it comes from the passion of a certain boxer or a certain area that we're in. We're also aligned with the Pope, with his Scholars program, which believes that music, art, and sports improve the quality of life. And the last thing they did during the pandemic is they created a program for incarcerated children, particularly starting in Mexico, but now moving to other Latin American countries, in terms of teaching them about meditation and the mistakes that they've made in their life. With Dr. Joe Dispenza, they put together this seminar and also did videos on domestic violence, which skyrocketed with our champions. When you see these guys who are warriors becoming vulnerable and saying, it's nobody's fault, don't take out your problems on your, you know, on the person you're living with, it resonates with some people.
Mm.
So we're doing what we can do as a
Right.
sporting organization.
Well, that's good, and we're talking about it takes a life to save a life, and I know that, you know, everything that all of you guys do helps. When Catherine was in North Carolina, we listened to her story about her own family, and I thought, Catherine, that was powerful for us that were listening, and because Matt and I had a conversation, and I said to Matt, I said, you know, I bet you in every single family in America, somebody's suffering from something. In my own family, my older brother did crack, lost all kinds of weight, thankfully beat it. My younger brother was pretty much an alcoholic. My mother died of congestive heart failure and had dementia and had some mental challenges. It seems like every family has something going on. So when I hear you talk about, you know, okay, this organization's doing this, I'm not quite sure if I would imagine there's some sort of national program, but when I think about Ohio and I think about Catherine's comment talking about the opioid problem in her state, when I think about the small town that I'm from in Altoona, Pennsylvania, when they had a huge heroin problem, I keep going back to my brain. Part of the problem is jobs. People get bored in their environment if they're not working and and engaged in some sort of activity that is fruitful and positive. But if we don't, I keep saying, if we don't teach people at a young level how to process through their challenges, whether they were raped or they come from a home where there's 10 people in it and it's always chaotic, if we don't teach them how to process through and self-manage, they're all just going to be band-aids. WBC helps and the help is good. This person, you know, but if we don't get down at the very lowest level and help people make good decisions and mentally work their way through their challenges, I don't know that the problem really is ever going to go away. And I just,
But Matthew, there is that kind of a movement. Like in 2014, the WBC joined with Grace Napolitano with the United States Congressional Mental Health Task Force. The Mental Health Task Force has things like NAMI and FAMI and all kinds of groups. They deal with their opioid addiction and whatever. We're one little piece of that task force to help, quote, knock out the stigma. There are national programs. The problem, again, in my mind is, and like the Mental Health in School Acts, which is now bringing counseling into schools, the problem is, again, they say 1 in 3 families has severe mental illness in it. If they're saying 1 in 3, you know it's got to be 1 in 2, or maybe every family, that they don't get prioritized with the other programs that we're doing. It's not that there isn't help. There's tremendous help out there. There are wonderful groups, anti-suicide groups, educational groups, people dealing with opioid all over the place. There are wonderful things, but it's not a priority to get that information out, and people grab at it when they're in trouble. It has to be taught in the schools from a very, very early age, because once you're reaching out for the anti-suicide line and this and that, so much of the damage is already a part of your DNA and you're struggling. But
so why do you think it's not a national priority? And I have my own opinions on it. Why is it not at the forefront of what our country does to solve these solvable, or at least stem the tide with these solvable issues?
well, I think to solve a problem, the first thing you have to do is admit there is a problem.
There you go.
Very machismo, just a
Agreed.
rich country, and I don't think we admit to the problems that we have. And I think that the one thing that has happened during this pandemic is that a lot of the covert problems that we have are becoming overt and becoming more obvious to people. So I don't think the mentality of this country was set up to say, like, we need this kind of help. And then add to that the getting good help has been relatively new. I mean, there is still not a tremendous amount of advancement in helping people in certain areas, you know, of whether it's epilepsy or brain wellness or alcoholism. These are all fields that are being developed and moved forward. But I just go back to, you have to admit you have a problem to solve it. And the only thing that's brought it to the front has been all of these school shootings. It's when the school shootings started to happen, people became a little bit more focused on mental wellness. But it was just this year that Biden has declared May officially as mental health awareness month. It's been around a while. Nobody wanted to go there. No one wanted to light the White House green. Why? Why? Go back to why it's a stigma. It's weak, it's vulnerable. That ain't us.
Right.
It's
And you
fear.
wanted to go back to when you were talking about, families having mental illness and dealing with that, and when things happen and, working through that. I can honestly say that after the burglary in 2013, we joke about it, that I became the CIA, the CSI agent that was going to work the case with the police. And I was looking for clues and putting things together and trying to, get those people that were involved in the crime, brought to the forefront and find my stuff. And it consumed me. And truly, if I hadn't redirected that energy into using what happened to my family and talk about it, I truly think there could have been some issues, because I was consumed. It was 24/7. Every moment of every day, I was consumed with the burglary of our house. I wasn't afraid to be there. I was looking to make those connections, get people, I was seeking justice. And I wasn't going to do it on anybody's terms except my own. And so I started assisting. I'm sure our local deputies were not super pleased that that's the path I decided to take with it, that I would call them all the time. But at the end of the day, I realized I had to do something different. And, you know, that's how I sought the seat for county commissioner. I thought, you know, being a local government, I could then start addressing these issues that, you know, I could put that energy into doing the good, into changing the conversation, reducing stigma. You know, little did I know that all of this was going to start unfolding and that my family would be not only a victim of addiction, but that my children would become, you know, addicts. And, you know, Deborah, they didn't wake up one day, raise their hand and say, hey, I want to be an addict. This is
Right.
what I want to do for the rest of my life. You know, there are things that have happened along the way and choices that were made. And, you know, we need to reduce that stigma, and we need people to be speaking out. If, you know, we just can get people like, you know, Mia and Jill and yourself and myself and Eugene and Matthew, and start really getting all these people on board that are already doing these great things, and start picking people up to, you know, help spread that word, because it's about reducing stigma. No matter whether it's mental health, addiction, alcoholism, you know, any of these broad, you know, terms that we're using, at the end of the day, it all comes back to, you know, we've been shamed into silence.
Shamed into silence. It's an imperfect world, and we're simply imperfect. And that's
And that's the problem. It's that fear of failure. No one wants to be the one to pull the trigger to say, what I don't understand scares me.
Yeah.
But instead of trying to understand and educate oneself on it, they become defensive and abusive in it. And that's what makes the addict, well, you know, they just could just quit. They brought it upon themselves. They're weak. They just don't want to work. You're not helping them. You're making it worse. You're devaluing their life, their opinion, and their situation. You know, and like I said, we don't wake up and say we want to do this. I didn't have to face a lot of those hardships. Socialization created situations that we never think we will become out of control with. You know, I used to tell myself anything I pay for will never rule me, until it did. But I was strong enough to fight back. My mother said to me, remember what you're made of. She said, I will not give you permission to die, but I will give you permission to fight. I had to pull within myself. But if you don't have a support system and all you hear is you're a failure, you're not going to be nothing, you hang around with nothing, that begins to be like a drop of water into a rock. Eventually, it's going to put a hole in it.
Right.
So instead of uplifting people, we beat people down because we're different. And all you have to do is start asking the question, well, why did you do this? Because what they don't realize is the problem that they numb for this 5 minutes is going to still be a problem when the high goes away. And whatever you had that could have helped come out of it, you've just used that and created a bigger problem. So it's like being on a hamster wheel, a nightmare that never ends, because we don't teach coping skills.
Right. So
we are a microwave society and we want everything right then, right now. But this pandemic showed how unprepared people were to cope with everyday living things when you didn't have modern conveniences.
right. I was going to say, is this program an hour?
Yes.
Okay, so we're coming up on an hour here in just a few minutes. My question would be, and I know we'll wrap up, is are there mental health sort of classes in middle school and high school? And if there are not, why is it not? It seems like it should be a mandated course that you should have to go through 7th through 12th to get
I
you through
agree.
those
And
years.
that's what the Mental Health in School Act is about. And it completely kept being voted down in California. They got it into 24 schools. And in
Okay.
the 24 schools, there was not one suicide, which sounds like a horrible statistic, but it is an amazing statistic.
Yes, it
Which
is.
works. Again, where is the funding? Why isn't it a priority? And I agree with what you said, Deborah, because I always think of kids like puppies. If you take a puppy that's been bad and you beat that dog, you're going to come out with not a good dog, but an aggressive dog. There's got to be a way to treat children in a manner that encourages them on a more positive level rather than to further abuse them with your judgment and abusiveness. Uh,
Um, uh, Excuse me. What I would say, and I just feel compelled to say it. The reason why I feel, and there are certainly a number of reasons why this is not a national issue, and why they don't have these programs in middle school and high school. For me, I feel like they want to keep the system going. It employs cops, social workers, doctors, nurses, drug companies, et cetera. If they fix the problem, then a lot of folks will be unemployed. It just, it keeps the money going, the funding, the handshakes. The system, they like the system the way it is. And hopefully that doesn't bring a down note on,
no,
on what we've been talking about, because it's been absolutely positive and fantastic and I've enjoyed it. But if you want
Matt,
to wrap that up and each person comment on why we really don't fix the system would be fantastic. Catherine.
Matthew, I'll just say quickly that I don't think it's that they don't want to fix the system. I just think it takes too much work to fix the system, that it's easier to do what we're doing now than to actually go and blow up the system and put the money and the intelligence where it can be. My nephew is one of the top litigators for Child Protection Service. Next time you should bring him on if you really want to hear the horror of what goes on with the children that get caught up in the system. But I don't think it's necessarily as cynical as that they want to keep things bad, as that they don't want to spend the time and the money and the effort to make things good. Just takes too much work. They can't agree on anything in this
Right.
government, let alone how to restructure this system.
Hmm. Okay. Deborah, any final thoughts? Dr. King?
You know, I just I just hope that we can broaden the conversation. And the more we put it in their face and the more we demand answers and we say we're not going to settle for this anymore, it shouldn't become important just when it hits your family. It should become important when it touches any family. You know, the idea of I am my brother's keeper is just words on a page if you don't take it to heart. And that's why I came up with it takes a life to save a life. So let me begin by offering you mine. Through my problems and challenges, I can try to show you how not to do the same thing. You know, even though I'm a drug counselor and I get paid for people that get high and lose their way, I'd rather be that phone call before they took the drug. And let me talk you down and say, we can get through this because this side of the fence is so much better. I want to be that phone call before. So there's always hope. And I want to be one of the ones that hold my hand out there to raise you up instead of put you down.
And
Well,
Catherine?
So I believe that for me, it is hope that I am showing that as an elected official, I am no different than anybody else. My family has been affected by this in multiple ways. My my job is affected by the epidemic, by mental health, by all of these issues. So being that voice for those who don't feel they have a voice, that's me, that's your local government. You know, we've taken this to different levels, and, you know, speaking out, reducing stigma, having that conversation, letting families know they are not alone. We are walking with them, and we are there for their support. I have the national helpline is 1-800-662-HELP. Again, that's 1-800-662-HELP. If anybody is in, you know, just needs help, needs support, needs resources, that's the number to call. That is the national hotline through SAMHSA. So very important. Speak up, raise your hand. Somebody is here to help. Feel free to reach out to us here at the podcast. Any of us can connect you with your local resources. There is hope.
Well, very good. Ladies, I certainly have enjoyed it very, very much. Thank you for allowing me to sit in the big chair tonight. Matt is actually out. I'm Eugene, filling in for Matt Kern. This has been episode 6 of Life is the New Cool podcast. We were joined by Dr. Deborah King and Mrs. Jill Diamond, and of course, Catherine Whittington. Thanks so much. We'll see you in the next episode, and have a wonderful night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Deborah, thank you, Catherine.